Welcome to another episode of Everything Intellectual Property. Today, we have a very special guest with us. This person has co-founded a company that turns videos into video games and has been massively successful to the tune of over 1 million games played and over 150,000 app downloads. Please help me welcome the COO of Overplay, Caroline Strzalka.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Going? Absolutely. And it's been, I'm really looking forward to this one. So thank you for agreeing to do this and kind of giving me some time here this morning to talk about Overplay. I saw this on Shark Tank maybe a few months back, and it was like, man, this is interesting. I've never seen anything like this, but it seems so like intuitive, or like, why did I think of that? So I guess with all that being said, can you maybe kind of give a description of what is Overplay? I know at the beginning I talked about turning videos into video games. Can you maybe give a little bit more of a description of as far as what Overplay is and does?
Absolutely. Well, once again, thank you, Dave, for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk about Overplay because we're a whole new form of media. And it's kind of one of those things where you almost have to see it to believe it. But yes, Overplay is a no-code solution for turning videos into video games. So anyone can do it. If you can film a video, you can now make it into an interactive experience. And so you're able to, it's almost like TikTok for gaming is the way I like to describe it to lay people. But at the end of the day, Overplay is a light layer of gaming that sits on top of streaming video. And the way that you make the videos into video games is literally you're playing the games into existence. You're dragging and dropping in inputs, or you're actually turning your phone if it's a driving game, or you're jumping if it's a jump, and you're literally adding those inputs on top of your video. And then within minutes, you could publish it out into the world. And of course, you could put in sound effects and interactive animations and music and all that other fun stuff to personalize it. But this is truly the first time where someone could just film a video, turn it into a game, and then share it. And it's a new patented technology. And yes, we were on Shark Tank, and folks have invested in us just for our patents, which has been pretty amazing. Yeah,
no, for sure. And I'm not sure if you can maybe give a quick demonstration off of the phone or whatnot. I'm not sure if that's easy to kind of do it on screen here or not. But that's, man, it's I don't know. I think it's pretty cool just because you think of, especially these days with kind of content creation and people making videos left and right, and then combining that with the video game market, which we all know is huge and it's kind of skyrocketed in terms of popularity, as well as this kind of financial market of it, and being able to combine those two into one thing is like I said, it's almost like a no-brainer. Or why did I think of that? It seems like you guys was able to kind of crack the code, and obviously AI is a big part of that, which was able to make that happen as well.
Absolutely. There's one thing about thinking about this because it almost seems like a no-brainer. And there's another thing around actually doing this, which was a heck of a lot of work, and is truly was something that no one has done before. So it's they call it an overnight success, 10 years in the making. Well, that's kind of like, in a way, what Overplay is, And so, but yeah, let me show you what Overplay looks like.
Okay.
It's available right now on iOS and Android. So if you want to download it, it's free. You don't pay anything to use this app. It's entirely free. And when I kind of show you, it kind of here you go. It kind of does look like TikTok for gaming. It's true. It is like you're swiping through games made by normal people about anything. I'll play this one for you because it's easy for me to play this one backwards, actually. And also another reason I want to play this one is because I made this one. So so this was women's 100-meter hurdles, the world championship. The kinds of inputs that you have with Overplay are tapping, swiping, rolling, which is kind of this motion. So imagine for POV race car driving games, and then jumping. But eventually, Overplay's inputs could be anything that the device can take. So it could eventually be, microphone for karaoke games. It could be shake. It could be multi-fingered swipe. It could literally be anything. Yep. And so, but yeah, so unfortunately, you're not going to be able to hear the sound, but there is sound. With this game, you're not going to be able to hear the sound because of my computer microphone here. It's not going to pick it up. But you can download Overplay yourself. It's a really lightweight app, and you could try the game out yourself. And so the way it works is that you just press play. It loads up super quick.
And this seems like this is kind of based off the Olympics theme here.
Yeah. So this was a YouTube video that we literally just pulled off of YouTube and turned it into a game. Because, of course, we wanted to show this as an example to Comcast for NBC. Cool. But there's going to be another. I'll just show this the side perspective. So what I'm trying to do here is match the leader's hurdle jumping. I'm matching the timing, and I'm getting points up here based on how accurately I'm putting in the input. So if you think about it as like Dance Dance Revolution or Guitar Hero, where the goal of the games is to match the action you see on the screen, that's what's happening. And over here, you'll see after the end over here, there is a leaderboard, and it shows you how well I did compared with other folks. So you see how well you did compared to other people. You could play it again. You could play more games. We wanted to finish this. Another patent though that we have is seamless transition between portrait and landscape. Okay. So it's kind of crazy, like what Overplay has with our little team that could. For sure. We have all sorts of really cool things that we've been able to discover that no one else has discovered. So
it seems like with the games that you played, you can play those against other people as well, or is it like, for example, I know you said, say for other people have played that particular game, you can see how your score measured up in relation to others, but can you maybe play games at the same time? Like, for example, okay, two people are playing the game at the same time, and you can see how well you're doing in comparison to somebody else in real time, as opposed to, seeing how your score matches up after the fact. Is that possible?
Multiplayer will be coming out next year. So, but right now what you can do is you can play a game and then you could challenge a friend, and your friend is not playing against you in real time, but they're trying to beat your score. So there is a competitive aspect. You can earn badges and trophies. If a brand created a game, they could have coupons or discounts that are, put at the end of the game. Or if you get a certain score, you get a certain reward. So now there's all sorts of opportunities for creators to reward fans and for brands to reward fans. And Overplay, it all can happen within that one app. So yes, the competitive aspect, it will end up being a big part of Overplay, and multiplayer will be coming out next year. Yeah.
Nice. No, that's that's amazing. I always ask in terms of the inspiration, and typically when I kind of interview a guest and we talk about the inspiration, it's something that they've encountered in real life, for example, a real life problem or an issue that they kind of came across, and they're like, okay, I'm going to invent something that satisfies or gets over this hurdle. What was the inspiration behind Overplay? Because it seems like this is kind of different in the sense of you don't necessarily come across it, or maybe you do as far as an issue or a problem in the real world. So was it kind of something that was always in the back of you as well as your co-founder Dan heads in terms of, okay, I always wanted to do this, or was it like a just kind of issue or problem that you guys were encountering in kind of real life that you said, okay, I'm gonna make something that allows me to provide for this particular thing?
Yeah, so Overplay Dan and I come from an interesting place. So we met at Sesame Street. I used to run digital media business development at Sesame, and Dan ran interactive production. So we were always thinking about ways to take content further. To make Muppet content is actually really expensive. That is live action. And so we were always, 26 episodes would be filmed in the beginning of the year. And then we would think about how we could take that content that was coming from the episode, include it into games, ebooks, apps, whatever it is that we would be making, just to take that content, like to get the most that we could out of it. So really to create that long tail. And so that was always in the back of our minds. However, Dan, my co-founder, he actually has a film background. He's not actually an engineer. He's a self-taught engineer, but he went to school for film. And so he thought about the game making experience very differently, maybe from a film perspective. We all take our experiences with us on our journey, right?
For sure.
And so Dan loves mountain biking, and when he would come home from work, he'd be following these creators on YouTube, and he would watch these mountain biking videos, these POV mountain biking videos, and he felt himself like doing this as he's watching these YouTube videos. And he's like, oh, that feels a lot like a game to me. I wonder if I could make it into a game. And so the way that he actually did it is using his film background. And this is one of those things where it's like, where now you think about it, you're like, oh yeah, this feels like it should have been obvious. But what actually he ended up doing is he ended up thinking, well, if I could ungroup the physical screen from the digital screen meaning what we're all filming, within this perspective, right? If I could ungroup them, what if I could then create a rhythm-based game based on how I'm turning I'm watching the video now, and I have to turn my phone at the same angle that the guy who is steering the mountain bike. And if I'm trying to match them, and I could get points for how accurately I'm steering with him, you could then create a rhythm-based game. So it basically all started off of a role-based motion off of a POV mountain biking video.
No, and it's interesting because I was just at a tech conference in Atlanta over the weekend, and Fanbase, which is an app that is similar to like Instagram and things like that. I kind of ran into the co-founder, and we had some words, and he had talked about how he had no, I guess, background as far as kind of development, software development, things like that. But he had this ideal for a game, and he ended up paying a nice amount of money to software developers to actually develop the game. So that kind of makes me think in your situation and Dan's situation, when he has this actual ideal for a game, just kind of based on his experiences, did he at that point try to go at it on his own to try to bring it to life? Or did he say, okay, I need to hire the right people to be able to help me bring this thing to life?
Yeah, so it's kind of a funny story. And actually, after we talked, David, a little bit earlier in preparation for this call, I did have a chat with Dan because so I was not yet part of the team when the first patent was issued, and actually the lore behind this is that Dan had this idea from the POV mountain biking videos, and then what he did is that he bought a book that was like how to file a patent in 24 hours. As a patent lawyer, I'm sure you would like.
Really?
Yes, and then he wrote the provisional patent. And as a normal guy, right? Like he wrote the provisional patent, and then he got a lawyer, and basically the examiner wasn't quite understanding what Dan had in mind. So the MVP, the minimum viable product, was not yet built, right? So Dan actually ended up creating a video of what he envisioned the patent should be, to kind of show what the MVP. He basically almost built the MVP, just to be able to show the lawyer what it is that he had in mind. And then once the lawyer saw that video, he was able to get it. He's like, oh yeah, no one's ever done this before. And so then the lawyer was able to write a rather broad patent, which is great, based off of what Dan actually showed them.
Wow. No, that's pretty interesting. So then I guess at that point, he end up building things out himself then, as opposed to, I guess, hiring, maybe software developers and other people to help him kind of build things.
He did have some help. So we actually had a friend who is another entrepreneur who had worked with a dev shop in Argentina, actually. And a guy, so that Dan approached that dev shop, and there was one guy who raised his hand and worked on Overplay with Dan on nights and weekends, basically to build out Overplay. And so it was like Dan and an engineer in Argentina, like over a couple of years, trying to see whether it was even possible to build the thing. Yeah.
So then I have to ask, and then at what point did you say, okay, I want to be a part of this? I'm going to bring my experiences, my expertise to the table and kind of try to take this thing further?
Yes. So Dan and I, as I mentioned, we worked at Sesame Street together. So Dan, we've known each other now like 16 years, but we worked together at Sesame for like 7 years. And we stayed friends, after I had left. I had moved on to Scholastic, basically doing similar stuff. I always get hired into companies to monetize white space. So it's like, Caroline, here's like a new technology. Like, we think we could do something in it. Why don't you figure it out? Right. So I'm the one that usually thinks about the business opportunity behind it, gets the funding, I'm the one that actually takes an idea and makes it real and makes it into like a real business, like something monetizable or like adoptable, right? By regular people. And so anyway, Dan and I stayed friends and we would meet, like, we're both kind of like, we're both always building other stuff on the side of our jobs. And so we were meeting for coffee one day. We would meet up, like, we would have like these monthly coffee meetings at like 7 a.m. In New York. This is not a normal New York thing. Most people in New York are not meeting up at 7 a.m. talking about, stuff that they're building. And so we were meeting for coffee one day, and Dan's like, I think I came up with a way to turn any video into a game. And I said, Dan, I was like, if you could build that MVP and we could patent it, I was like, I'm in. So I already told him that I was going to be in even before I knew what it was. But Dan was always the smartest guy in the room, like at Sesame. Like, he was always like the guy that sat in the corner, didn't say anything for the whole meeting. And then it's the last 5 minutes of the meeting and Dan raises his hand about something. And then he blows your mind and you're like, oh, shoot, we have to redo everything that we just did. Dan has a better idea, But, I always knew that, it'd be great to build something with him. You always want to have people like Dan and I were definitely yin and yang. Dan is great at stuff that I'm not good at all. And I'm good at stuff that Dan is not good at all. And so coming together, we're like the whole package. And so anyway, this is before COVID, basically. Dan told me about the idea. I already had told him that I was in if he could build it. And then he calls me up during COVID and I was down in Florida with my family, and Dan is calling and he's like, well, what do you think? And I told him yes. So so it wasn't too much arm twisting on my side to like join the team. Yeah. So
let me ask you this. So is it when you get that call and you're saying, okay, I'm down, do you like drop everything? Because I would imagine that you're working and have a day job and things like that. Do you drop everything and go full time in it? Or do you say, okay, I know you mentioned it before, kind of doing things on the side. Do you keep the day job and kind of just work with Dan on this thing on the side?
Yeah. So I started working on the side. So what I was doing was, at that time, I actually had a direct-to-consumer flower company that I was actually doing with my sister, and it still exists today. And I was doing that full-time. I was down in Florida for COVID. Everything was, it's like in flux, and then I was like, yeah, let me help. At first, it was in the beginning, it was like, let me help you fundraise and create a deck and like get this thing on some sort of footing, right? For you to be able to bring on engineers to further build this thing out. And so, yeah, basically in the beginning, I do recommend to entrepreneurs that, you do make the first step, but don't quit your day job. Like, it takes a long time. It will take you through at least like whatever you might envision this will cost you, or the amount of time this will take. Multiply that by anywhere between 3 and 5 times, right? So like 5 times the amount of money and 5 times the amount of time. Everything is much harder than you think. Yep. And it's blood, sweat, and tears. But yeah, keep your day job, work nights and weekends, find the energy to do it. Like, if you really believe in it, like, find the energy, find the time. If you could find the time to watch Netflix, you can find the time to build a company. You know what I mean? Like that's
for sure.
Yeah.
So then it kind of, we touched on it a little bit, or you touched on it a little bit earlier, and this kind of where my expertise comes in. We were talking about filing patents, and you told Dan, hey, if you can, it seemed like you were already kind of thinking about kind of protecting it and saying, hey, if you can get a patent on this thing that I'm in, and him, reading a book on how you patent something in 24 hours and kind of writing a provisional. I guess from your perspective, what did you see? Obviously, you knew about patents already, but what kind of gave you that kind of forethought of saying, hey, man, we need to kind of protect our invention, protect the product, and that's extremely important to kind of building a business around that product. What was it, an experience? Was it something you read or saw? Obviously, you were in Sesame Street and dealing with Sesame Street and these different companies that you I would imagine that you came across patents and things like that. At that point. So I guess what gave you that forethought?
Yeah. Well, I knew for technology, it was one of those things where, like, certain businesses, I don't think that you need a patent, right? Like certain businesses, definitely trademark, copyright, maybe, you have some sort of secret recipe, right? Like like something like that. So, but on the technology side, especially if you're building something brand new, like, so when Dan told me about this, I was like, if truly no one has ever built this before, this is going to be very valuable. And so I also knew that you could also kind of take a little bit like baby steps in terms of getting a patent, right? So file the provisional, see whether it's truly a new thing. And then also too, we had we knew some good lawyers that could help us out, and they weren't going to break the bank, right? So we could dig up the money somewhere to be able to file the patent, right? Like it's one of those things where it is expensive. It's an expensive process. However, if we think it's valuable to have that defensible moat. So within technology, if you can build a defensible moat and if you're really a first mover and you want to be able to, like, the first mover is not necessarily always the winner, right? Like it's usually the second mover or the third mover, right? Who wins. And so you kind of got to do what you can to protect what you've built, right? And we thought it was important. And the funny thing was, though, is that during COVID time, so as we were fundraising, we had a lot of early investors that were like, why are you wasting money getting patents? Like you should just be putting your money into building, hiring developers, blah, blah, blah. But Dan and I, in our gut, we knew that protecting what we built would be very important. So as the money kind of like, as the markets kind of like were condensed a little bit more, because during COVID, you actually did have a lot of money floating around for new startups and things like that. But as the money kind of, went away, or as the VCs tightened their belts a bit, now it's like, okay, what is your IP that you have? So we're so happy that we went down the route of getting a patent. Yeah.
No, and again, I think, I think I was telling you about this offline a few days ago when we talked, as far as Dr. Dave Smith, who invented the Q collar that kind of helps protect against concussions in contact sports such as football and hockey. He kind of said it, hey, if you're going to get, if you're trying to get investors money, then you're going to need some type of patent or some type of, I guess, IP that's kind of, like you said, building that defensible moat. And I guess that's still interesting and crazy that people early on, investors, told you, why are you wasting your time trying to protect the IP? But like you said, it seems like it paid off later down the line when VCs started tying up, okay, what were they giving out and investing in, and say, okay, what is your defensible moat? Do you have IP protected? And that helped you out as far as getting money. So I don't know, maybe I'm kind of biased because I'm a patent attorney and an IP attorney and saying, hey, protect the patent. But I don't know. I just think it's important, especially like you said, with regard to technology, to have that stuff protected. And another thing that you said was interesting as far as kind of the second and third company, or second and third, I guess, person to the table ends up benefiting. This had to be maybe a year or so ago now. Dan Klitsner, the inventor of Bop It, which was kind of wildly successful, especially in my childhood. And he kind of said something that always stuck with me as far as kind of being right. And if you have it was an acronym, right, but it stood for relationships, idea, the timing, and what was it, and the execution. And if you have all those things, then you have a good chance of hitting a home run with that thing. And again, he had Bop It as well as a number of other games, toy games that were extremely successful. So I guess, what are you guys doing to make sure that, okay, being the first one to the table, you're not only just the first one to the table, but you are also the first person to be able to kind of benefit from it, not only just the recognition, but from a monetization standpoint. Because I think of like the fidget spinner, where the who invented the fidget spinner, it didn't take off around that time, but obviously later on, everybody had fidget spinners and were buying fidget spinners left and right. And unfortunately, that patent that she created years earlier had went abandoned, I'm assuming because of not being able to keep up the maintenance fees with it. And she didn't get a chance to, I mean, she got the recognition, but she didn't get a chance to benefit from it, the popularity from a monetization standpoint. So I guess, what are some of the things that you all are trying to do to make sure you not only get the public recognition as far as being the first to the table, but also benefiting from it monetarily? Because again, you're spending a ton of money on this thing.
Yeah, it's you know, I kind of see it almost like a stagecoach sometimes. Like, I kind of describe it. You got a bunch of horses that you're having to drive at the same time. So, look, legal and protecting the IP is just one of them, right? You're also building a team who is building along with the vision of what you have. So you have these milestones that you're trying to reach at that time. And then you're also matching the milestones with the investment that you need at that time, right? Because the investment matches milestones. So you're hitting those milestones, you're able to get more investment, but the more investment is able to fund the work, especially if you're pre-monetization, which is what we are. So we haven't started monetizing Overplay yet, but we're working towards monetization, right? So you have all these horses, they're all moving at the same time. And as a co-founder, you have to kind of keep that all going. And thank God there's two of us as co-founders. So Dan kind of keeps the product side going. So those milestones and working with our team, we have a team of 20 right now. And our team is all over the world. So Dan and I are actually like the only two Americans. Everyone else, we have folks in Argentina, in Colombia, and we have folks in China. We have folks everywhere, and in Europe, and we have. So Dan basically is kind of like overseeing the team on that side. Meanwhile, I'm helping Dan out with strategy. I'm doing the fundraising. I'm doing business development and partnerships. So what's coming next for Overplay is some partnerships that we're going to be announcing over the next few weeks, which are huge because we're doing pilots. And so right now Overplay is in beta. And we're so proud of where we were. So basically we were on Shark Tank, and we launched our early beta in March. And now we launched our full beta in June. And we're at that point where we're now doing pilots with media brands and other folks who want to use Overplay. And we're also building towards our API. So the API would allow Overplay to be integrated onto other apps and websites. And that's being released in 2025. And so we have all these horses going at the same time. It's total like crazy stagecoach, pedal to the metal. Like I have not taken a vacation in years. It's one of those things where you gotta kind of keep on really, really pushing until this thing can kind of balance itself and make itself like real in that way. We're getting to that point. I mean, it's not just on mine and Dan's shoulders anymore. We now have a team that's helping us out, and but we got to keep paying them. We got to keep bringing the money in. We're currently fundraising. We're raising our seed round right now. We raised 2 pre-seeds prior to this. Mark Cuban coming in from Shark Tank has been very beneficial for us to be able to raise more money. So, we got to just keep hacking at it. So
no, for sure. And I was going to maybe talk about especially the Shark Tank experience here in a little bit, but then you talk about the funding for it, and again having that, I think, pre-seed funding, I think it was $3 million that you guys were able to raise, and having some kind of big partners such as Sound Media Ventures that are backing you all. I guess how and maybe important is that, especially since, like you said, we are not necessarily monetizing at this point. So we do need the money to be able to kind of pay the team and kind of keep this thing chugging along. So can you maybe talk a little bit about just kind of that whole funding aspect? Because I know you were saying you're spearheading that department, the importance of it. I guess I think back to Ring, which again, I know they talked about on Shark Tank, and maybe Mark Cuban talked about it in a video thereafter that discussed how again, having a raise, Ring had to raise a ton of money before it was able to put itself in a position to be sold to Amazon for $1 billion. And I don't want to kind of compare you guys to Ring. Hopefully you guys have that same exit or whatnot, but do you see yourself having to maybe kind of raise a decent amount of money to kind of get everything in place in a similar fashion before you guys can, I'm not saying that you guys are doing this to have an exit, but to the extent that you guys have an exit later down the line, do you think, having to kind of raise all this money to be able to kind of stay afloat, so to speak, is important, or how, I guess, how do you kind of see that balancing out?
Yeah, these are all great questions. But yes, we have had to raise a lot of money. We knew that going in though, because what we were building a game maker and a game player, both for iOS and Android. So 2 different platforms, game maker, game player. It's all in native code. We needed the expertise behind that to build these things that had never been built before. So it's not, when we're talking about building in native code and stuff like that, there is actually no reference library for what our developers needed to build, right? So they have to be very creative and actually solve brand new problems that no other developer has faced, right? So this takes time and it takes money. And so we raised our first round of funding, our first pre-seed we raised in 2021. We raised $1.5 million in 2021. We raised it on a safe. We raised our second pre-seed. We wrapped that up last year. So that was a $3 million round. That was also a safe. We raised that through both venture capital, angels, and also a WeFunder. So we did a very successful equity crowdfunding round. We're actually one of the most successful WeFunder campaigns last year, which was great because with WeFunder, if you have like $250, you can invest in a company, right? So you can become an angel investor as a normal person for like $250. Yep. And then, and now we're raising a $5 million round, and we are doing both a WeFunder again, as well as an institutional round for VCs and angels. And so far we're at about 1.2 million raised on our WeFunder. And then we're having some really great conversations with VCs and angels. And we're hoping to wrap up that round over the next couple of months. But yeah, the WeFunder is awesome. I mean, it's one of those things where I don't think it's like, equity crowdfunding is the first route you should go down. The first route you should go down is friends and family. And friends and family, like, my friends and my family don't necessarily have money. I'm like a middle class kid from Philly, and so, but what we mean by friends and family is that, colleagues, folks that you worked with before, like people that might not even be your friends, but you're connected on LinkedIn or whatever, and they think your idea is awesome, right? Like these are early investors. And so I would say the first thing that you want to do is kind of go the friends and family route, start building something, and then maybe you can go down the equity crowdfunding with, a WeFunder or something like that, and start raising an angel round. And, you got to kind of take it in pieces. And, but we knew that we would need to raise money prior to monetization. So we're going to be monetizing in 2025. Okay. We've raised right now in aggregate about 5.5 million. We're going to need to raise, ideally, as I mentioned, we're raising $5 million for this round of funding. And so we need to bring in about $4 million more, not to monetize, but to begin monetization and also take us through until the next milestone. And then we'll raise our next round of funding.
No,
you never finish fundraising.
No, right, exactly. You're definitely always kind of raising money or fundraising. Yeah. And I guess the cool thing for these type interviews for me is I get a chance to learn a lot. Now, I heard of the Kickstarters and Indiegogo. So is WeFunder kind of along a similar vein as those, or is it maybe a little different?
It's different. So equity crowdfunding. So Kickstarter and Indiegogo, that's not equity crowdfunding. That's just crowdfunding. That's where, your dog needs a surgery or whatever it is that it might be. No. Equity crowdfunding is where you are selling equity in your company in exchange for investment. So it's not a donation. And it's kind of funny when I talk to people about like, oh, we're doing a WeFunder, and they're like, yeah, I'm happy to donate like, 200, whatever. And I'm like, no, this is not a donation. Like you are buying equity in our company.
Sure.
And it's done through an instrument called a crowd safe. And so what happens is that a safe is a Y Combinator created instrument, and basically makes it very easy for early stage founders to be able to raise money. It's like it's like a one document that doesn't change, and it's kind of like a convertible note, except it's even more founder friendly in a way. And so it's all done through a crowd safe. And what happens is that WeFunder, so there's 3 companies that do it. It's WeFunder, Start Engine, and Republic. They do equity crowdfunding.
Okay.
We went with WeFunder for a number of different reasons, but what happens is that on the cap table, on your capitalization table, it all aggregates into one line item. So, you'll have 1,000 people invest in you, put in, somebody puts in $250, other people put in $10,000, whatever. It all aggregates on one line item on the cap table, one line item on the cap table. It keeps the cap table nice and clean as the founder. And it's like, and then you're able to get those early investors, those normal people become your users of your product, and they also become your advocates. And WeFunder has been it's been instrumental for us in fundraising, especially in this rather strange time to raise money.
Sure. So. And that's cool, because I guess I didn't look at it that way in terms of, okay, obviously if somebody is different, like you said with the Indiegogos and the Kickstarters, if somebody is donating or kind of buying a product, that's one thing. But to the extent that somebody's buying into the company, as far from an equity standpoint, they are going to be not only the users, but the people who are going to be advocates and help push the product out to the masses on their social medias or by word of mouth. And I know after our initial conversation, I'm like, man, I actually really love what you guys are doing. I'm like, man, I have to get into this thing. So I'm looking forward to this. Definitely at some point soon, I'm looking forward to invest on WeFunder. So that's really cool. And I'm looking.
Yeah, check us out on WeFunder. There's a bunch of other, it's not just us. That's a cool company. There's a lot of cool companies on WeFunder. But I'm a huge advocate of equity crowdfunding. I actually spoke recently on a panel on it's called regulation crowdfunding. Okay. And so I spoke on a Reg CF panel, and I was on with a bunch of other entrepreneurs. One guy even had a beer company that sold to private equity. And they had it's crazy. And it's, in a way, it's kind of like circumnavigating the VC route. If VCs are not opening up their wallets, you got to find a way. As an entrepreneur, you have to find a way. You're navigating a ship, So yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So then kind of moving on to the Shark Tank experience, and obviously you talked about Mark Cuban and his investment being instrumental. And I know we were talking maybe a few days ago about how that was a unique experience. Typically people apply and go pitch and things like that to Shark Tank, but your guys' experience was different in the sense that they kind of came to you guys as opposed to you guys going to them. Can you talk a little bit about that experience, which I think was pretty cool and a unique one?
The ancillary benefits of WeFunder, I'll tell you, Shark Tank found us on WeFunder. And so I think it was an associate producer who, so if you look at the sharks, right? How did they make their money? Mark Cuban made his money on software. Mr. Wonderful made his money on software. Robert made his money on software. And yet what usually appears on Shark Tank is a lot of consumer products, right? Yeah. A lot of food, a lot of, and so I think what had happened is that the sharks really mentioned wanting to diversify what comes on the show. Right. Sure. Not just another cupcake company. And it's kind of funny when Shark Tank reached out, they emailed me. Right. And my co-founder, so they emailed me and Dan, and we're on a morning call. And I was like, I don't know what you saw, but Shark Tank emailed us. And he's like, oh no, that's got to be a scam. That can't be real. And I was like, no, I looked up the woman that emailed us, and I was like, she has a real email ad, she's a real person. Cool. And he's like, do whatever you want. I was like, I'm going to call her. And so anyway, I had a call with her the next day from Central Park because I was like in between meetings and in New York, and I had a call with her for an hour. I told her what we were doing, and she's like, "That's absolutely brilliant." And I was like, "Thank you." And she's like, "We'd love for you to be on the show." And so while we didn't kind of go through that whole like application process in that way, we did end up having to fill out a ton of forms and still had to go through interviews and things like that with Shark Tank. But I will say it was one of the best experiences of my life. Just in general, very supportive of entrepreneurs from beginning to end. And you have certain things that happen in your life where you can kind of really point to things that changed you. Shark Tank is one of those things for me. It was one of, I mean, I've never had a problem with presenting or doing anything like but there was something about kicking it up to a next level and challenging yourself, because it's months in the making, but it was really one of those really fantastic things to be able to prepare. It really accelerated our development process for Overplay because we had to get ready to show the product on the show, and really, to be honest with you, really push our technology. So we like to push it to the extreme levels, right? So of things that we had never done before. And in fact, it accelerated Overplay's development by about 6 months, actually, which is huge. And then Mark Cuban coming in, and then you have to negotiate with his team after. So what you see on Shark Tank is really what it is. They know nothing about your company.
For sure.
You usually, by the way, the average pitch on Shark Tank's an hour. You see only 10 minutes of it. But it's a true VC pitch. But we had, we'd raised money from VCs before already, and we had already raised a price round. So we kind of knew what we hadn't raised a price round yet, but we had kind of raised with a certain valuation. So we knew what we could accept or what we couldn't accept. And Mark came in at the point of what we thought we could accept. And so it all worked out okay, so yeah.
And it's interesting because I would imagine, like you said, it benefits me because on as an aside, I typically do these, Shark Tank breakdowns where if they have a pitch, I'll kind of try to break it down from an IP attorney's perspective, especially as it relates to the intellectual property, whether it's trademarks, patents, things like that. And it's a lot easier for me when it is a tech company because it's easier to talk about from a patent perspective as opposed to a cupcake company or a company that, it's not really applicable to patents, maybe trademarks and things like that, but it's not really applicable to patents. So it was cool, and hopefully they do more of the technology companies so that it's a lot, more interesting for me to kind of break it down. But I guess with you guys being a technology company, not necessarily selling a product such as a cupcake, obviously I have those companies that come on that I kind of interview, and they talk about how their sales skyrocketed because it was some type of consumer product, as you mentioned, that they went on and pitched and sales skyrocketed. But it was different from you all in terms of having this technology company. I'm imagining that the downloads or whatnot kind of shot up afterwards from that. But I guess going into, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it was like 2,000%. Within like, so which is great. But then also too, smartly, we decided to launch our WeFunder at the same time. So within a couple of days, we had $500,000 in funding on WeFunder. Wow. After being on Shark Tank. So, but that was strategic. We had also been prepared for that because we raised a WeFunder before. Then to raise a second WeFunder, you have to get all the accounting in place. So actually, from the filming of Shark Tank, which was September 2023, we filmed September 12th, 2023. And by the way, if you film, there's no guarantee that you're actually going to air.
Right. Yep.
So we took the bet, and we're like, you know what? We are betting that we are going to air because like the episode was entertaining enough and our technology is cool enough. Yep. So we were betting we were going to air. And so we actually took the whole, we were like, okay, as soon as we knew that we were like, okay, in October, November, let's get the accountants already going on the new, we had to do the full kind of accounting of Overplay to launch the new WeFunder. So that way it could be ready for March if we were to air in March. And you only find out 3 weeks ahead of time that you're actually going to air. So you only have 3 weeks to prepare. So we needed, and you need months to do the full accounting if you're going to do a new WeFunder. And so we took the bet that it was going to happen. And I know I am the eternal optimist, but thank God, like, we're like, okay, because if you're pessimistic about this at all, and you're like, oh, we were on Shark Tank, but but who knows, like, they might not apply, whatever, and by the way, another thing too is that if you're on Shark Tank and you get a deal on the show,
that doesn't mean it's going to close.
The only way that you air is if it closes in real life. Yeah, that's the new thing. So so we had to negotiate, and I was the one that was negotiating in real life with Mark's team on the actual investment, because what you agree to on the show is not necessarily what is, because they don't know anything about you. They haven't done due diligence on you. They haven't, you guys haven't talked, like, the only thing that they know about you is what you pitched on the show. And so, there's like 3 months of negotiations behind that. We closed December 22nd with Mark's team. Like, we pitched in September, we closed in December. Like, so you got to kind of like keep on keeping on, like, with the like calendar and moving things forward. It's like, it's got to keep those horses going, right? Like,
hey, let me ask you this. You don't have to you don't have to answer this question if you don't want to, but we saw on the show 500,000 for 4% as well as a 500,000 salary. Is that maybe kind of similar to what was, I guess, closed at the end, or was it maybe dramatically
I'm not allowed to reveal what we landed on. What I can say is that Mark did come in at the valuation that basically we were raising on at the round, at our prior round, which is what we so Mark did come in at that valuation. He came on both as an investor and an advisor. But the way that what was mentioned in the show is not exactly how it's happening in real life. However, as I mentioned, within a couple of days of airing on Shark Tank, the $500,000 investment that came in through WeFunder already came in through the 2 days at Shark Tank. So actually everything comes out in the wash. And so it all ends up kind of working out in a similar way, even though it's a little bit different than what we talked about on the show. But I will say the thing that's most important for us is that Mark came in as an investor and an advisor. So usually, and I think that we were maybe the first company where Mark actually came in as an advisor. So that is a whole different, actually, that's a whole different contract that we have with Mark, actually. So
for sure. And I have a couple of things to say about that, just because number one, it kind of changes your guys' position. If you're coming on a show for a $500,000 raise at 2.5%, and then obviously you strike a deal, but as you're negotiating, you're essentially making $500,000 on a week. So I would imagine that kind of changes kind of the negotiations between you and Mark. But I think that also kind of shows you how much Mark believes in it. To your point of him not only being an investor but an advisor, because we all know, like you said, he doesn't typically do that. I said something earlier as far as Mark, Robert, and Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary, kind of being more the techie people and made their money. It seems like kind of Kevin O'Leary, he's willing to invest in anything as long as he can make money. Maybe to a lesser extent, Robert. Seems like Mark is like more the techie guy, and obviously Barbara has kind of, for people who saw the episode, if she doesn't understand it, she typically doesn't invest, and she typically doesn't understand tech stuff. So it, I guess, made sense as I was watching it that she probably wasn't going to do it. And then you had, I don't think Robert.
Robert. Yeah, it was. We actually had. So the guy who so Robert wasn't on the show. It was so Jason Blum from Blumhouse, Blumhouse Film. So Blumhouse, he was the guest shark. And he's the guy that created the new version of The Exorcist and Five Nights at Freddy's and whatever. He comes from a horror film background. And so, but yeah, you know what? Overplay was always earmarked for Mark. I
saw that 100%.
Yeah, it was one of those things where it was like, we wanted Mark as our investor. And I think Mark's, like, literally as we're presenting in front of the sharks, like Mark is writing down a ton of stuff. Like you could see he was already thinking about what he was going to offer us. And we kind of saw it coming a little bit, because when you're there, you're just kind of looking across. But it was just like, it was so awesome just to be in front of them and to be able to pitch, and share that idea. It was great.
And I would imagine that has to be a great feeling, because it seems like going into it, you have maybe 2 or 3 sharks that you think, or maybe targeting, that you hope based on their background and how they made their money, that they're going to invest in. Like you said, this thing was kind of, earmarked for marketing, but obviously things don't always play out the way you want them to. But it's great. That has to be a great feeling, that going into it and saying, okay, this is a Mark Cuban thing, and to actually have that play out that way, that has to be like an amazing feeling.
Yeah, it was so genuine. Like, so when we were kind of, coming off of the pitch, and, Mark came up and shook our hands and gave us hugs, and Dan and I were like walking back out the door, and I was like, what we were feeling was so genuine elation, that we did it. And like, by the way, nothing broke, because by the way, you don't get a second chance on Shark Tank. Like, if something breaks, yep, like, you just got to keep running with it. Like, and so there was a chance that the tech would not have worked. Like, what if it froze up, or like, what we had 8 devices, by the way, going on at the same time.
Really?
Because there's no over the shoulder filming on Shark Tank. So like, ideally I would have this app, and like, there would be like over the shoulder camera, but no, that's not the way it works on Shark Tank. So we had literally 8 devices going at the same time to be able to actually be able to show what was on the screens, what Mr. Wonderful and Mark were seeing on the screens, because they played against each other. I mean, there's a lot that we had going on there. That was like a technological feat in itself. Yeah. So,
and just have things executed to perfection. It seems like I've seen pitches that, like you said, they had some kind of technical difficulties, or things are breaking, and that affect whether or not they kind of got to deal with one of the sharks, which not only I would imagine getting to deal with one of the sharks, but how the public is perceiving a product. If they're like, man, this thing doesn't even work on Shark Tank, or these having all the problems, so I really want to buy this thing, buy this product, or buy into this whatever it is, to kind of for myself. So I would imagine that has a big effect as well. So I have to ask you, and I typically ask, I guess, 2 questions. Number one, what is the biggest breakthrough of the company? It seems like Shark Tank maybe was a big breakthrough, but again, you guys raised a ton of money. So what would you say up until this point is the biggest breakthrough of Overplay?
Yeah, I think just building it to begin with. Could this idea of like gaming on top of streaming video, a no-code gaming platform on top of streaming video, could it work, right? Like, so the biggest thing actually came in the very beginning of this company. It came with the MVP. Yes, this is possible. And now that this is possible, what more is possible? And that did come through what the IP, what the patent actually was able to break out as well, because our patent is very broad. So it not only covers like gaming on top of streaming video, but also covers gaming on top of live events paired with computer vision. And so the very early stages of that, the basis of what this company is, it's almost like building a house. Like that very basis is what was the unbelievable miracle, right? So sometimes in startups, they have to talk about various miracles that have to happen, right? But the first miracle is actually being able to, can what we envision actually be built, and can it work? And once that was checkmarked as yes, we now could, skyrocket. And so that was actually the hardest part. Each of our milestones are very difficult. Shark Tank was never a milestone for us, by the way. It was never in the car. Like it was one of those things that we never applied because, we are a software company. And so it was never like a goal of ours. Oh, we have to be on Shark Tank. Sure. No, that was actually an ancillary thing that came because of WeFunder. But the next hard things that we're doing, we are building a thing on gaming on top of live events. I am working very hard. No one's ever done that before. We're working very hard on it, and I think we're going to crack it. And so, yeah, I mean, we are working 24/7. There is no, this kind of very glamorous startup founder life that they show people driving fancy cars and being on vacations. I don't know what planet they're living on, but that's not our planet.
Right.
We're a planet of work.
which is kind of leads me to my next question, because like you said, they show the glitz and glams of kind of startups and entrepreneurs, but we all know it's not necessarily I guess a incline like that, but it's like a sine wave where you have the ups and the downs. What has been like the biggest challenge that you guys have kind of faced up until this point? Because all startups have them, all companies have them. So up until this point in time, what would you say is the biggest maybe challenge that you guys have faced and had to overcome?
Yeah. I think that a challenge that we have is that a lot of investors have never built anything. And to be frank, and look, I used to be an investment banker, so like I can kind of speak from this perspective, but I will tell you, if you were an investment banker, and even if you took companies public and whatever, but you've never actually built anything and you went into VC, you will not necessarily understand the founders'
different
challenges. I mean, and it's great for folks to be able to believe in founders in that way, that they do go into VC. But if you were an actual founder yourself, and then you go into VC, you can actually understand what the founder is going through and the complications and things like that might happen. Yeah. So for us, there's a lot of investors who claim to be wanting to invest in the newest thing, the most cutting edge ideas. But because we don't have direct comparables, because we are a first mover, because this is a new technology, because we're pre-monetization, because of all of this stuff, we still might not be check marking the boxes. They may say they want to invest in the most cutting edge, newest, blah, blah, blah. But then they look and they're like, oh, you're not monetizing yet, or you're not in beta yet, or your beta is not far enough along yet. So it's like, I feel like there's a lot of, to be honest with you, speaking out of both sides of their mouths, with saying on their website, we're going to invest in the newest, coolest, whatever. And then when you actually talk with them, they would really prefer for you to be a second mover. So I will say that that's, at least from my perspective, I'm sure if you ask Dan, who's on the product side, he might have a different answer to that. But from our perspective, because we don't have it's not like we're an easier, version of Unity, or it's not like we're an easier version of TikTok or whatever it is. I like to say we're like TikTok for gaming, because it does help people envision what Overplay is even before you see it. But in truth, it's like, it's the first mover complex. It's like, how do you paint a picture of what you are building if it's not built yet? I mean, that was our early thing, right? When we raised our first round of funding, like, it wasn't fully built yet. Now we're in beta. People can get us much more quickly, but it was a lot of finding the true early stage investors, which was a challenge.
Well, and that's very interesting. And just on the IP side of things, and kind of dealing with bigger companies, the way I guess I've been explaining to it is, especially when you're talking about big companies, the CEOs, like you said, they talk about cutting edge technology and wanting to be at the forefront. But a lot of times the CEOs and who have the cushy jobs, they're not trying to risk it all in a way with going with an extremely new thing or a new company, as opposed to, okay, just, let's go with something that's a little bit more short thing. Whereas maybe somebody who kind of doesn't care, or maybe is a startup kind of investment firm or whatever the case may be, they're willing to kind of go after it a little more and take those, I guess, risks, if you will, as opposed to the CEO or whoever's handling the money or the decision makers at maybe some of these big companies, that they don't want to be the ones that's going into the board or whoever that says, okay, we invested X amount of money into something that just didn't work, but it was a totally new thing. It seems like they don't want to have that on their resume or having to explain that, especially being in a cushy position. So I guess that's how it was explained to me, which I guess makes sense. But like you said, it's okay. Don't say you want to be on the cutting edge of technology, where when we bring you something cutting edge, you're like, it's a little
You're not
too
far
new.
enough along yet. You're
For
not.
sure. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting. So then I guess maybe the final two questions I have. Number one is, what goals would you give to an aspiring entrepreneur? And it seems like your perspective is unique in that you were on the investment banking side of things and now being on the founder side, the startup side of things, and having a wealth of experience in other areas. What advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs who's looking to maybe get off into the lifestyle or the entrepreneurship, but they kind of don't know the best way to go about it, or they're hesitant for whatever reason? What would you say to those people?
I think there's two big aspects here. So the first is to find a co-founder who has complementary skill sets to yours. Okay. So oftentimes there are co-founders that they're both good at the same thing, and they end up stepping on each other's toes. And sure. And then you also still have these gaps that exist within the company, because in the very early stages, it's just you two who are building this thing, right? It's maybe an engineer or whatever. So the thing about it is, like, if you find somebody who has complementary skill sets to yours, yep, that would be the best thing. So say you have the idea, or say they have an idea and you come along, right? But, that is one of the big things. I mean, my relationship with Dan, as co-founders and as friends, we worked together too prior. So I knew what he could do and he knew what I could do, right? Sure. We'd already proven ourselves to each other, because we did this in the corporate setting. And so, and I have implicit, trust in Dan and Dan in me, right? Absolutely. And we just hand that off to each other too, because it's like, we can't do everything. Like, as one person, you will literally go crazy. So I would say that if you have an idea, find somebody who would do this with you, but complement your skill sets. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, don't quit your day job. Do this on nights and weekends, and see whether it could be a thing, right? Mm-hmm. Could this be a business? And don't just think, oh, this is a great idea. Let me just go, definitely go for it, but go for it in a very measured way. I know it's so hard because we're all so tired, but if you're excited enough about this, find the energy to work on this on nights and weekends, and then see whether this could be a real thing that could exist on its own. And once you're able, once you get the confidence that, yes, like, this could be a real thing that's saleable, like, that is, and build it, I'm saying, keep your day job enough, keep it for as long time as you can, hold on to it for as long a time as you can, where you're proving out your product and you're raising some money for it, right? Because that's a whole other thing where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, this thing could work. But now it's like, raise a little bit of money for it, launch the darn thing, keep the day job. And then, look, once you raise your first pre-seed or your second pre-seed, then quit your job. And
for sure.
Right.
I like that.
You got to take it measured. You got to take it measured, because it's like, this is like, and you need money to exist. Like, you need to pay the rent. You need to eat. Like, sure. You have kids. If you have, and then I guess the third thing, man, I'm telling you, and this is a whole other like conversation. Find a partner who is supportive of your journey. Like, if your partner in life is like really risk averse, or doesn't like you take, you really need to have that conversation with them, because they're going to be going through this with you. And even if you shield them or shelter them from it, they're going to be feeling, if they're risk averse, they're going to feel this anxiety around you doing something risky, and they might not like it. And it's, this is especially a challenge for women, because most women are not expected by society to be the risk takers. And so this, I think one of the reasons why a lot of women are not entrepreneurs, because they don't have the support of their partner in their lives, doing their own journey. Yeah.
And I love that, everything you just said, especially about the risk taker part, because, man, you're talking about having somebody who is maybe compliments you, or at least understands that, hey, I'm going to be a risk taker, and they're okay with that. It just seems like that would help out tremendously. And as opposed to someone who's, hey, the first sign of trouble, they're kind of out the door, and that kind of adds to the stress and all that much more. So I mean, I definitely think that's a great point, and definitely something good to think about as you're kind of going through this journey, whether you're a man or a woman, to make sure your partner is just kind of understands you and the things that you're looking to get off into. And then I guess the last question is, how can people not only follow you, how can people follow Overplay? How can people be a part of the equity team? I know you talked about that early on. How can people just kind of follow what you guys are doing? Because you guys are doing some amazing things. And like I said, I'm kind of listening and talking to you, and I'm like, I'm definitely, I have to be a part of this in some way. So
you gotta be
to do this interview, but I'm also looking to maybe invest as well. So how can other people just kind of follow what you guys are doing?
Yeah, we welcome you to. So I guess I just want to preface this in saying that Dan and I are normal people. Like, Dan grew up in New York. I grew up in Philly. Like, we're just like, we worked at Sesame Street. We're like these normal people who just had this amazing idea and went for it, right? And we want to bring other normal people along for this journey. Like, why should VCs or the super rich be the only folks who could invest in unicorns, right? And with all my heart, I feel Overplay will be not just a unicorn, but a decacorn. I think we're going to have a huge exit one day, be it through M&A or through an IPO. Look, I have taken companies public as a banker. Like, I've taken lesser companies public as a banker. And I really feel like Overplay has a lot of legs on it, also because of the IP that we have. But so one of the reasons why we did a WeFunder in the first place is because we wanted to bring normal people along for the journey. We want you guys to invest and also to make money off of this, right? We're democratizing gaming. We believe in that. WeFunder is really democratizing investment. And check us out on WeFunder. We're on wefunder.com/overplay, /overplay. And we're one of the top companies. We're always trending. And so you'll probably see us on the homepage as well. And then on that page, you could read a ton about us. There's videos about us and everything. Our deck is, by the way, all the way at the bottom of the page. If you want to download our deck and see all of that. You could also check us out on overplay.com. Download Overplay for free. It's both on iOS and Android. The buttons are right on the page. Nice. And then we're also on LinkedIn. So you could follow us on LinkedIn. You could follow us on Facebook and Instagram as well. Overplay. But yeah, you can't miss us. We do have Mark Cuban all over the place on our stuff. But we're so proud that he's joining us on this. But yeah, and tell your friends about it. We also, one of the crazy things that has happened is that Overplay is, of course, not just for media and entertainment, but we're also now being adopted by classrooms. The military's reached out to us. There's all sorts of uses for Overplay, for turning video into interactive experiences, as you can imagine. And yeah, just yesterday, Overplay was introduced into a curriculum in a New York City school, which was like unbeknownst to us that this was even happening. So we think Overplay is going places, and we really welcome you to join us for the ride. Definitely. And I'll just kind of leave the audience with, definitely go check Overplay out on WeFunder. Go download the app and turn your videos into video games. And I'm excited for, I guess, what's to come with Overplay. I think the future is bright, especially given that you guys, you guys are already crushing it and doing some things, especially with the live events and kind of being able to add that functionality to it. So yeah, I'm excited, and audience, definitely go check them out on WeFunder as well as Overplay. Go download the app. And she dropped a ton of jewels. Hopefully that you guys had their pencils and papers handy and were taking notes. And yeah, until next time, audience, we are out.